And it's as simple as 2 drinks a night could be the difference between it being a dark hole and saying I'm going to focus on the show and not drink, being totally fine. So
Come again? 2 drinks a night? Welcome to the Naked Texture Artist. Welcome to the Naked Texture Artist. In this episode, we continue our conversation with Daniel Harkness, a compositor who thinks important thoughts about the bigger picture of visual effects and our role in it as artists. But first, a few thoughts on my status, which I force myself to share because in many ways this podcast is a summary of my experiences as a professional artist, as well as those of my guests. But in addition to that, I know it's a reality shared with many of you. So I'm happy to use this moment to bear witness to that. Also when it's painful. In fact, I know some of you describe this podcast as a kind of therapy for you, which is absolutely one of the important reasons I set out to make the Naked Texture Artist in the first place. So this is definitely in the Naked Texture Artist camp. A reality that needs to be acknowledged. And for those of you who are not in this situation, please do sleep with one eye open. I think that's the best you can do. So these past 2 years since the strike started, each of these years I've worked around 5 months out of the 12 months in a year. This is the winter of our discontent. On some perverse level, I suppose it's better than nothing. It's sort of that level where you just about can scrape through tooth and nail. Starving, but not dying. And every day you worry and wonder, will this ever turn? Or should I retrain as a plumber or something? Where is that line where such a decision needs to be made? When does Colin Kaepernick stop training and keeping himself in shape for a comeback that never comes? I know I'm not alone in this. I see my LinkedIn feed full of such stories, and worse still. It's also a space where you start thinking, what if this is it? What if there will never be another gig? Surely not. But day by day, that doubt grows stronger and stronger. In fact, everything in life do come to an end. When we're children, we think everything is endless. Our parents will live forever. We will live forever. But adult life, of course, quickly disabuses you of that notion. I lost my mother a few years ago. Of course, I miss her terribly. I particularly miss our deep conversations, which were not possible for the last few years as she bit by bit descended into her final form. So you can mentally go back to that time and place which was literally your last meaningful conversation with her. In that moment, you never knew that that was it. No more after this point. Not to be morbid, but it illustrates an important point. Over the course of any life, whether trivial things or bigger things, things you treasure, things you don't care about, there will be a moment where this is the last time you, see your parents, have sex, talk to your best friend, move house, kiss your children goodnight, travel to another country, use a certain software or device or play your favorite games console, eat your favorite food, drink your favorite beverage, watch your favorite film, things you probably take for granted. And most likely, you will never know that this was that last time. But with the industry in this upheaval and gigs becoming shorter and shorter and harder to come by, with what looks like a Bronze Age collapse happening around us, you can't help wondering, is this it then? Will I never texture another asset? Of course, I can and do texture things at home. But if you've been working on the highest level, for example, as a member of an elite special forces unit, surrounded by people with deep expertise in each of their fields, together producing something outsized and incredible, if you tasted that and called that place your home, do you think you can ever feel satisfied by popping off a couple of rounds down at the local shooting range? Will that ever compare? It'll probably just make you miss what you don't have even more. Maybe you prefer a different analogy, but I'm sure you entirely take my meaning. And if so, this is the end. Like a man on death row, your mind goes back over all the work you've done. Among artists, we always talk about our work. So we often discuss, what was your favorite gig? But here, now, it takes on a much more finite and serious air. Did you hit the heights you had dreamt of? What was your favorite asset? What were those moments which makes you long for it so today? Can you find a way to make peace with it? Say goodbye to it? And put it all to rest in your mind? If this is the Bronze Age collapse, I fear it is, you will have to. You'll have to find a way to put it to rest. Perhaps I should explain the term Bronze Age collapse. The Roman Empire created a world of incredible sophistication, of technological marvels and comforts and amenities and civilization unheard of elsewhere. Running water in places without natural water sources, sanitation by sewers, collecting waste underground away from where people lived, complicated structures of government and law and order, international trade among the continents, a society of a level of civilization higher than ever seen before. But contrary to what you think, despite its impressive achievements and feats, not invulnerable. In fact, operating this society, although creating a great life for its citizens, was incredibly costly. And constantly gnawing at that society was the far less sophisticated barbarian tribes on its borders. On the face of it, everything still works, things have never been better, but in the end, that turned out to be just paper thin. All it takes is one or a few more isolated events, like a drought, large migrations, internal rebellion, a famine, and then one day the external pressure and the internal cost to keep maintaining it just becomes too great and the whole thing collapses. And what followed was not another Roman Empire 2.0, following in his footsteps and building on what had gone before, like the Roman Empire itself had done as it eventually took over after the Greek Empire. But a world that fell several hundred years backwards in terms of development, civilization, technology, law, and order, the period we refer to as the Dark Ages or the Middle Ages. Engineers who could build aqueducts to transport water from miles and miles away were no longer trained, so that technology was lost as people with the know-how eventually died out. City planners who understood the need for sanitation died out, and the Black Plague instead swept across Europe, and so on and so on. If you're interested in collapsing civilizations, communities, industries, or other complex systems, they all share from the same pool of similar attributes. A year ago, on the theme of the Bronze Age collapse, Allan Lasky wrote about the scenario of a carrier loss, a military term that describes the catastrophic setback of losing an aircraft carrier in battle. Something that dramatically changes your ability to wage war in an instant, and something that will take a really long time and a lot of resources to rebuild, if ever. He likened the big tentpole visual effects studios to aircraft carriers of the Navy. Studios like ILM, WETA, Digital Domain, DNEG, Framestore, and MPC. Incredibly powerful, storied, and surely too big to fall. Since his original article, we have had our first carrier loss, MPC. I can see a lot of similarities with the Bronze Age collapse and the time we live in. A few years ago, those tentpole studios surely were too big to fail, but constant pressure from underbidding by the ever-growing masses, the pressure of maintaining an incredibly costly machine, and people quickly migrating from bigger screens to smaller screens meant that apart from anomalies like the streaming wars, they would be fighting for a smaller and smaller pie. When the Hollywood strikes came around, what was that? The passengers on the sinking Titanic fighting over the remaining deck chairs? Is this too gloomy? I encourage you to read Scott Galloway's overview called Peak Hollywood. Sadly, the numbers don't lie. Until TikTok and YouTube videos have visual effects budgets, our world will be rapidly shrinking because that's where the eyeballs and so the dollars are flowing. When I first read that article back in January 2024, my first inclination was that this would result in seismic shifts in our industry. At that point, I think most people were of the opinion that once the strikes were over, we'd soon be back to normal. I understood that this was something beyond the strikes. The strikes were part of the symptoms, not at all the cause. I wanted to interrogate this to understand what this new world would look like. My first idea was to put together a small Zoom conference consisting of trusted people from studio management, production, clients, tool providers, and high-end artists, each explaining how this would change and shape their world. Maybe I reached out to you personally. Well, that was what that was. But as the timeline has progressed since then, I think we can do that thought experiment ourselves. So what will the Bronze Age collapse look like? A lot of generalists using Blender to turn out quick content for TikTok creators and YouTubers. A lot of AI slop to cover what mid-level studios used to do. A world where high-end asset work nor specialization doesn't exist anymore. Maybe a dying skeleton crew remaining at a place like WETA. The last ones who still have that old world expertise and specialized knowledge of how to create high quality 3D creatures. The rest, a wasteland. And with that comes knock-on effects which accelerates it further. Without a customer base, specialized software will no longer be economically viable, so development and maintenance will stop. Younger generations will no longer bet on this career. Governments will no longer support these industries. Like aqueducts of old falling into disrepair, a high water mark that will never be met again. Too gloomy? Maybe. Have I just spent too much time in my head? Perhaps. But despite my naturally positive inclination and with my skin in the game and the love I have for this work, I can see a version of this scenario playing out. Which takes me back to my personal situation. Am I ready to say goodbye? Am I ready to accept that there will be no more texturing? I am not. I just cannot speak those words. One of my favorite thinkers in visual effects, guest of this show, Daniel Harkness, says that he has so many other things besides visual effects that he would like to do with his life. Manuel Huertas, another good friend of the show, says the same thing. The weird thing is I used to think the same. I have so many other interests and things I want to achieve in my life. But creating visual make-believe, despite all the nonsense you often suffer in visual effects, it has just stolen my heart. And then there is the expertise you built up over many hard years. That feeling of being good at something. Or is this just some scarcity bias messing with my head and my heart? I don't know. I can't see it clearly. But when you stand there on the edge and it's time to jump, like anything we love that we lose, that we have to say goodbye to, it always comes too soon. I don't know. I can't. I find it really hard to do. On so many levels, I just really love this work that we do. Well, isn't bargaining one of the stages of grief? I think that is what this is. A form of mourning, grieving a lost vocation, mourning an old world changing irrevocably. I'm trying to wrap my head around it all, which is why I need to speak about it now. Speak these words and listen back to them to hear if they're still true. It's hard to read the label from inside the bottle. This is just how I feel, the thoughts I think. I'm absolutely certain I'm not alone in this. How do you feel about all of this? How do you see this play out? And what does it mean to you personally? Am I wrong? Can you prove me wrong? I would love for that to be true. I would love to hear your reflections. But first, over to my conversation with Daniel Harkness. Do you do art on the side? Growing up, were you a traditional artist, or the kid that was drawing Spider-Man comics in his math books or things like that?
I was and I wasn't. I was fortunate enough to win the Year 10 art prize, so I was the awarded the best artist in the school. So, but I'm actually these days I can sketch something, but I couldn't draw nearly as good as I could when I was a teenager. I've lost the drawing skill, and I used to do clay and models and all sorts of things, and I think because I was heavily into art at school, so as a youth, I was a good artist, and then I think I became a little bit disenfranchised with what I did in my year 12. I guess in Australia, we have our final year of high school is called year 12. This is where we get our certificate to get into university. I created a video game, and so did all the artwork and did all the programming, and it's for people grading art. They're like, well, what is this? There's a big chunk of code, and all printed out, and then the laptop and the screen and the video game going on. And I got awarded like 50%. That was my score. And so I think, that, quite influential as a teenager. And these, like, oh, shit, I'm not very good at art. So
so you went from award-winning artist Daniel Harkness
in 2 years to mediocre 50% artist.
That's cruel. That's cruel. I'm so impressed. You created the art. Yes. Awesome. Big, a massive body of work. Then programming on top of that. What programming language did you use for this?
It was called, I think it was called Future Basic. No, was that the Amiga one? Because when I was a kid, I had tried all these different programming languages.
Wait. Hey, but you said the A word there.
Amiga.
You grew up on an Amiga?
Yeah.
Oh, my goodness. Deluxe Paint, am I right?
I had a Disney Animation Toolkit.
No way! I couldn't find that anywhere. I mean, illegally.
Everything was illegal in Australia.
Obviously. I for the longest time, I mean, I grew up in a little dirt town in Denmark, so it was only the big games that made their way there. Software was so hard to find. I had my eyes on that one for the longest time. I never could find it.
Right.
Lucky you.
It was fun. Yeah, I made some animations and hooked it up to the VHS player and recorded them to VHS tape. Yeah, there's something magical about the computers at that time. Yeah,
absolutely. I mean, I taught myself machine code assembler just in order to get stuff on screen that could move around and do things painstakingly hard just to basically be an artist. You had to learn to be an engineer first. But hey, it weeded out the men from the boys.
Probably why you're a visual effects artist, because
Absolutely. There is a lot of similarities there. It blew my mind when I understood on my home computer back in those days how the three colors RGB worked against each other, and you could produce any color with that. It just I couldn't get enough of it. I was just sitting there sampling colors until the wee hours of the morning. It was crazy, but what a time that was. So at that point, you give up on art altogether. You're like, were you disappointed with it, or were you just disappointed with yourself as in, I'm not that good, or you figured the world is not good and I'm not interested in it? Or how did it go?
I think it coincides with many things going on in my life at that time. My parents were getting divorced. So I think the culmination of, I did excellently in every other subject at times. It's all maths, physics, all these science-related things. I studied very hard at that time, but there was a sort of a whole lot of turmoil surrounding my life at the same time. So there was bullies and the divorce and I think not feeling safe in life at that time. So I don't think there was then. Art wasn't focused. The focus was sort of getting out of where I was at the time.
In an alternative universe, could you have seen a path forward? When we're in our teenage years, unless we have an uncle or a parent or somebody that has walked that path, it's a very hard business or career to figure out, like, what am I going to do with this? How do you get from being a precocious teenager that's good at drawing to actually commanding a salary? Those steps are not very often they're not very visible. Did you have a plan in front of you?
No, my plan was to get out of Adelaide.
Okay.
So I would go to Sydney, where half my family is in. Half my extended family is in Sydney, so we used to take lots of trips to Sydney. And I wanted to get out of Sydney. Get to Sydney, and I really just could have. I could have just done it, but I guess maybe I was crippled in the way that I could, self-reliant. I was, a late bloomer, I guess, and in that I was. My dad said that no, you can't go until you pass the tertiary education. So, and whilst I dropped out of university, it still says I really want you to get a tertiary education before you do anything. So I stayed in Adelaide to do that.
What did you study at university?
I was doing maths and computer science. Whilst I wanted to get into computer systems engineering, I missed out on that. I took the lower tier, and then sort of was bored, I could say, in the first year course. And I maybe bored and misguided, a combination of the both. And And so, I dropped out. And then the next year did a diploma in multimedia, which I guess now, these days, is what these VFX school it would be the equivalent, and then went to Sydney. And looking back now, I would just have gone travelling,
Just
exploring the world. Yeah.
create some distance, sort your head out,
Just
buy some time.
a gap year.
Yeah.
Looking at, knowing now at that time and having listened to people, if I'd just gone to San Francisco and walked through ILM's doors, I could have got a job. It was that time. So it was, and just, listening to the way people tell the stories of back then, if you knew how to use a computer and you could make pixels do things, then you could probably get a job at that time.
Oh boy, those are some bitter thoughts I don't want to think about. Yeah.
I don't. Yeah, you can't see these things until
No.
they're well past. So it's luck. That's luck. Yeah.
One of my colleagues back in England, he managed to get a hold of a early copy of ZBrush and was just working on that thing no end. And he was literally calling up the switchboard at WETA when they were starting out working on the original trilogy. And the phone number he had was okay, but there was no receptionist. There was nobody to answer the phone, and he's calling all hours of the day, desperately trying to get hold of him. And later he talked to someone there, and they said, like, if somebody had picked the phone up at that point, we would have hired you on the spot. But he never got to work for WETA and had to take the long and slow route through the London visual effects studios many years later. Sliding doors. Oh boy. Anyway, so today you barely can sketch, but it doesn't matter because you're making images in other ways. Do you have a private art practice or something that you sort of like to explore outside of work? Or are you just, once you come home from making images all day, then you're just like, I'm done with it. I don't want to think about it anymore. Like a chef that's sick of the smell of food when you've been in the kitchen all day.
Yeah, there's a bit of the latter. Once you're doing that all day, you don't have I just don't have the mental capacity to do an extra art project. I mean, I will do something like writing or programming or something separate.
Yeah, something to clean your palette, something refreshing, different. Rebooting the machinery. How do you see yourself? Are you a starter or a finisher? Are you one of these people that are just like super excited at the beginning of a project, or are you just even motivation the whole way through, which sees you through?
Both.
Both? How does that work? How do you manage that exhaustible resource called motivation?
Well, I guess there have been projects I haven't finished, and you are contracted. I will technically, that we're on contracts. So if the contract expires and the project's not finished, because sometimes we're given contracts to the end of it's usually to a date, and they think the project's going to finish on that date. And so if things aren't aligned, you may not finish the project because you're contracted to say July, and they've extended the show till December, and you may have taken another job. You may not want to continue the job. Anyway, most shows I finish. That's the goal. We're there to finish the show, and so it's quite disruptive to not finish the show, and then you've got to find replacements, and so there's that aspect of it. Because I see it from the point of view that everyone is there to get this show finished and created. It's quite amazing that these films get created at all because there's so much work is involved.
True.
And so it really does suck if I guess especially from as the higher up that you get, the more you're trying to rely on the team to finish this thing. And if the team is churning, it just makes this an extra little step of things that makes it more difficult to get the thing done. So, I mean, how do you maintain the motivation? The motivation is just get to the finish line.
So you don't get to a point sort of like the Dark Night of the Soul towards the end of the show where you're just sick of looking at the same things, or
No.
that sequence that just can't be final for the life of you or whatever. Maybe the client is indecisive. Oh, we haven't figured out the ending yet. We're not sure and you're just going right in circles over and over looking at the same things, and there's no good answers.
Well, usually it's a reshoot, so you've got new material. You're not going over the other.
I'm starting to think you guys over in the shot world as opposed to acid world. It sounds pretty good what you got there. Well, maybe I'm on the
not good.
Right.
It's more work in the same amount of time, and then the quality level that you've been trying to achieve for the last 9 months or whatever takes its toll. So.
What's your best gig? What's a perfect gig or really, really good gig? How does it start? How does it flow in the middle? How does it end? And what are the key junctions where it could go off the rails but it doesn't, and why?
Yeah, well, your perfect gig is good leadership, and they've put together the team that they want to put together. They won't probably get 100%, but at least they've. And then as you've got a whole year to build the relationships between your people. So if that relationship has to be good throughout the process, because then people can feel it when your supervisors aren't quite gelling, or they have a problem with the coordinator, and the production team is not on the track together. It trickles down, doesn't it? You can. With humans are amazing things. Things that we can sense things. We get a sixth sense that things aren't right. So
that's when you learn to ignore that supervisor, but not this one.
Right. That's not a good thing if that's happening. and there's techniques that people do. There's techniques I guess it's like, I don't know how they do it in the army. Sometimes it feels like you're working in the army, with the hierarchy and everything, and then you're in a production office and you get on the same page. Even if you're not on the same page, and whilst you work through those issues, you get on the same page, so the whole team is on the same page. So I guess that's a good show, maintaining that through the whole process. And then it gets difficult at the end, because people are working 60, 70 hours a week, and nerves get a bit frazzled, and your client has changed their mind and reshot something, and it's a challenge, to say the least. I guess there's different attitudes that you can bring to this, and I think it's really a bit of mindset and a bit of self-discipline, and it's as simple as 2 drinks a night could be the difference between it being a dark hole and saying I'm going to focus on the show and not drink, being totally fine. So,
come again? 2 drinks a night? When you said that, I thought, okay, 2 teammates that are maybe not on the same page, sharing 2 drinks a night, and all of a sudden they're best buddies. But that's not what you meant.
No, I meant drinking to take the edge off, coming home at midnight and getting 4 hours sleep as opposed to 6 hours sleep or something like that. Yeah, a health thing, mental health thing. And it's different from the social aspect. Maybe the 2 drinks with the buddies at the desk, I've been to plenty of shows where people have had a bottle of whiskey on their desk because we're there at 11 o'clock at night. And they're like, let's just have one to get through the next hour.
I remember working on a TV show in London for a mid-sized studio that shall remain nameless. Oh my goodness. The first episode of that TV show came out, and it was scathing reviews by the fans. They literally were saying, this is something to the tune of the worst visual effects we've ever seen. And we still had 12 other episodes to finish at that point. And as you maybe know, in London, there is no overtime pay. Mm-hmm. So when you're brought in, you're working there late, and you're brought in on the weekend as well, you just get so annoyed with your life. You just get so angry and annoyed with your life that why am I wasting my weekends? I could be with my family or rest up or do something else instead of working on this thing that nobody cares about, as was already patently obvious through the free press that is the internet forums. So unless you had a couple of shots or something in you, it was very hard making it through a day of productive work, because to just keep the demons at bay a little bit. But then when you're leaving your desk and there is like empty bottles of something or cans of something alcoholic, and production on Monday asks, what were you doing on the weekend there? Why we found this in your garbage can? Then it's hard to come up with an answer that satisfies all parties.
Maybe the answer is pay people overtime.
Yeah, hey, absolutely.
Yeah, you're getting a bargain if people are working 80 hours a week and they're not getting paid overtime. It's like, what are you doing?
Yeah.
And I think it's changed in London now, right?
It could be. I mean, I left London in 2015, so I don't know what's going on nowadays there. But in Canada, love it. Overtime for everything. It's only fair. It's only fair, really. Yeah. So, to be honest, I think most of us are not interested in working overtime. It's not like we're looking to bleed the company dry. We just want to be fairly compensated.
There's something about, I kind of like 60-hour weeks or 50 to 60-hour weeks, but I don't have kids, so I think it's different when I talk to parents.
Yeah.
If you can maintain a focus, and if there is a level of excitement, there's been exciting shows, and I can't wait to get into work and work. So, yeah, and there's a tipping point, right? There's a tipping point where 70 or 80 is like it's killing my brain, but 50 and 60, if you're really enjoying the work.
Yeah, I agree with you. Yeah. I agree. Yeah. My wife is forever telling me, "Why are you still working? You've already worked 8 hours today." And I'm like, "Yeah, but I'm just doing it, and it's going to be so cool, and I just want to, And before you know it, you are already putting those extra 10, 20 hours in every single week, whether you're paid for it or not, just for the love of the craft, because you enjoy what you're doing. So I'm with you on that. But past that point, it literally you cannot recuperate fast enough to get back in the saddle the next day and be reasonably productive. So, yeah. So these gigs, how do you spot good gigs from bad? Do you have any metrics that you're looking for or trying to avoid, or sort of any telltale signs? Or are you fine, 911 gig, no problem, I'll walk into the flames as long as you pay me what they call, FU money?
Happy to walk into the flames.
Really?
Yeah, happy to walk into the flames. But that's a 911 gig, so you know it's going to not go on for...
They don't always tell you that up front, that it's a 911. This is only something I learned in later years of my career, that's a thing.
They tell me.
You just think, I'm going to have a great time, we're going to have a camaraderie, we're going to develop the show in the beginning and all of that, and then you just trust into a team where people are angry and bitter, and you think, what happened?
No, I think these days I've worked. I would like. I'd love to work with people I've worked with before, and great. I'd love to do a show with that person, or people or shows or things like that. Say when I had the opportunity to work on Avatar, I was like, yeah, cool. I'll go work on this.
I'd imagine you also know that you're making cinema history at certain times.
Yeah. You know that the show's going to be something special. That's part of the driver. And then you've got the people driver on some shows, and then, there's so many different things that will say a good show, but I don't think you can tell a bad show. I'm talking to a friend at the moment, and he was put on a show, and he's like, God, nothing's going to the way I was promised. But he almost left it, but he's pushed through and finished it. And sometimes these things you can't tell. You just can't tell.
I think we have to remind ourselves often that this is a commercial transaction. I'm selling my services as an artist. They are selling a project to me as well. So anytime there is sales work involved, you're obviously putting your best foot forward, or trying to, and you're not talking about all the bugs and the flaws of the product. So it can be hard to ascertain upfront what's going to happen.
That's interesting, actually.
On a given product.
Yeah, now that you mention that, that's interesting that you mention it, because we would used to interviewing for people for the team, for the comp team. I remember that it was always about how do we. You have these certain stages of the interview process, and then there was always the selling of what shows we're working on. You would interview the artist, and they would we would ask them about what sort of their skills are and what they like to do, and are you a technical person or are you a creative person? And then it was a big sell on the shows that we're working on, and and for me, I always thought that was strange, because once you're in the shows and you're working on, they all seem good, and then it was only until, say, things like Avatar, like my first show, Furiosa, it was like the selling point was, I'm going to go work on a movie. And then it didn't matter what it was. It didn't really matter. It was just happened to be Furiosa, which was luck. And I think if you're starting out in your career, it really doesn't matter. You're like, cool, I get to work on a movie. And then I think as you become older, you might become a bit more discerning to these sorts of things. So it changes over your career.
Absolutely. In the beginning, you're just so happy that the promise of maybe having your name on the credits rolling on the silver screen afterwards, and on occasional pizza for your work on the weekends. That's all you want, Sleep under my desk? Sure, I'll do it. But when you've had a few times around on that rodeo or around that block, you just realize, wait a minute, there's more to this than that.
Yeah. I was thinking about this before, and that, would I do because I've never done a Christmas movie.
Oh.
And it feels like...
Is that something you would like to do?
It feels like a rite of passage to every visual effects artist to do a Christmas movie, because I don't know, there's some cool Christmas movies like Bad Santa, and, they're not cool, but most Christmas movies are designed for kids, and they seem to be painful to work on. But I was thinking, like Alvin and the Chipmunks Christmas movie is like, do you want to like something that's very, very, very commercial, doesn't seem in any way so much art. It is a story and a film and storytelling, but it seems to be designed to get people into the cinema at Christmas and make a buck at Christmas. But I was thinking, if I did a Christmas movie, I would still probably find joy in it. And give me 200 shots. How can we figure out how to do this? Something really procedural, and find a process within it. Because I think it's my attitude towards Christmas maybe that's tainting this. But
you should be careful now. You're speaking this into existence.
That's actually that's right. You what was it? What was this? You if you talk about something, then it happens. So maybe I should
absolutely
talk about Christmas movies.
Yeah, absolutely.
Alvin and the Chipmunks Christmas 3.
Hey, I'm looking at the back catalog of films that I worked on, and I don't think any of them qualify to be other than a footnote in cinematic history. So, as your compatriot Allan McKay, a story effects artist and visual effects supervisor, says, the first rule of visual effects: as long as they have money, I have time. So, if you are paid your day rate and treated reasonably well, so be it, whatever the subject matter may be. But back to what you were saying earlier, I think one of the things that you appreciate more and more over time is to work with certain people. The joys of working in a team that is well gelled, everybody's holding up their end of the bargain, and you can trust each other. There's something really special about that. It doesn't happen all that often, but that's a beautiful thing. And particularly people that you've already, gone to war with, and you can trust them fully. That's something where I'd sign up for that any day, no matter what film we're making or whatever else the parameters of the production may be. Doesn't happen all that often, though. But I sort of imagine it's sort of like so on an asset team, it's probably different from where you're looking at it. But, when you have a small team like a special forces unit, which is typically 6 men or 8, depending on where you are in the world, everybody have one specialty and a backup specialty that they know how to do. And everybody's just super skilled at their discipline and trusting implicitly that everybody have each other's backs at all time without stopping to think, does my guy to my right, my guy to my left, is he doing what he's supposed to do? When you have that, you can, and everybody's working in lockstep, you can produce outsized results with a small team. And that is a beautiful, beautiful thing to be a part of. It is just something that speaks to talks to in the human experience, but it's that's for me. Those are the shows that I'm gravitating to nowadays.
How do you keep those teams together as well?
Yeah. What are the things that start making the team splinter off in different directions, or the things that make them gel closer together? Daniel Harkness will be back in a future episode. Thanks for spending a little bit of your day with us. We have a tiny bit of housekeeping to do on the way out. If this episode has been helpful to you, why not share the podcast with your colleagues and friends? If you'd like to support the podcast, I'd appreciate if you bought me a coffee. You can do that on Ko-fi. That is spelled ko-fi.com/The Naked Texture Artist. One word. If you have suggestions, comments, or questions, I'd love to hear them. Feel free to drop me a line on thenakedtextureartist@gmail.com. That is The Naked Texture Artist written out in all one word @gmail.com. As I mentioned, having a busy day job in visual effects means my release schedule for this podcast can be a bit irregular. So if you don't want to miss out, subscribe to The Naked Texture Artist wherever you get your podcasts. Or follow the podcast on the socials, then you'll be alerted when the next episode drops. The music in this episode was Awake by Tycho. Nick Sifoni helped put the sound together, and everything else is done by me, your host, Mark Pierre Sondergaard. Speak to you soon.